Patients who have been infected with the coronavirus and have recovered could be the key to fighting the disease. One potential treatment uses the antibodies built up in the blood of patients who've had the virus. Risk and behavioral scientist Dr. Shada Chakraborty joining us live now to discuss this very thing. Doctor, good to see you. How does this treatment work? It seems to be making the headlines now of essentially using plasma to help those trying to recover from coronavirus.
That's right. We're looking at how to use antibodies in a way that is solution oriented and addressing the next phases of how we deal with COVID-19, which is getting back to reducing the transmission and mortality rates and getting people back to work and back to their livelihoods. So we know that the global CFR, case fatality rate, has decreased from original 3.4% to 1.4% globally now. In the United States, we've still only tested less than half of 1% of the US population. We know from data emerging out of other countries like Iceland that up to 50% of those who've had COVID-19 may have never been symptomatic. That suggests that there's a range of people that we haven't even offered diagnostics testing to, that antibody testing can pick up and see, okay, these people had it, which is scary because they could have been spreading it unknowingly. But the positive outcome of that is it also means that we can study that and say, here's the immunity and the length of immunity that builds up post having and getting rid of COVID-19 yourself without any sort of treatment. And so that information is really powerful, and that knowledge is going to be really crucial going forward in how we develop the treatment protocols for those who are recovering, and generally going forward, how we think about looking at the population of the US and around the world and driving that transmission and fatality rate even lower.
Right. Let me ask you about the testing really quick, doctor, because you mentioned a very good point. There is a population in America that may have contracted the virus, gotten over it, never even got tested. Therefore, they're not calculated in all of these numbers here. So how are we ever going to know if their plasma, their antibodies could be beneficial if we don't know they've had the virus? So can they come back now and take a test and know they've had it before? Or are the tests only applicable in that 14-day period?
So that is something that is going to be determined as it's a second priority at the moment for the US government. We know that private sector is really pushing for these antibodies tests to be developed and rolled out, and we'll have better answers to those questions once we start seeing the length of time antibodies actually exist within an individual. Once we are able to determine that, then we'll have that time frame of when these tests are still applicable. But right now, the priority is still diagnostic testing so we can isolate and quarantine those who are showing symptoms. Once we get the private sector going, which we're already seeing, and there's a lot of hope there in terms of not just these antibodies tests, but potentially existing vaccines for other disease states, that last night the Global Virus Network said they were on the brink of announcing potentially would be useful and something that could be treating COVID-19 in the near future. There's a lot of private sector mobilization happening around trying to find solutions that then in partnership with the government can really be rolled out.
Yeah. Real quick, in Los Angeles, the mayor there is saying to his 4 million some residents to wear a mask when you're walking around the city. How effective is that? And will we see this kind of rollout in all major cities and hotspots?
So we know that masks are really most effective still for those who have symptoms and to catch the virus at its source. That's where you really want to see masks being used. We don't have formal guidance yet for everybody to be wearing masks, although it seems to be going in that direction. We are at a dearth of masks still that are medical grade that are required for those on the front lines. And so one thing I want to throw out there that I would ask cities to consider is the testing kits that were distributed post-September 11th that included gas masks. They're scary looking, and the last thing you want to send is a signal of fear to communities. But given our new reality, given that people are talking more openly about masks and recognizing this is a culture of support where we need to look out for one another, we're in a normal now that if we work together, we will get out of and go back to business as usual. But for now, why not support the lack of supply by using what we have in stockpile, like those gas masks post-September 11th, for those on the front lines that are being called to address some of these virus cases, like different, like the NYPD in New York City or other police forces around the country. If we get behind that, then we can actually free up the actual N95s for those who need them on the front lines, and then Americans can still follow the CDC guidelines, wear a mask if they have the symptoms, and as we begin to hear more about wearing masks that protect those just in their daily lives, sure, but as of now, the guidance is still mainly to protect those who are exhibiting symptoms from not spreading that disease.
Yeah. All right. Risk and behavioral scientist Dr. Shada Chakraborty, always good to see and hear from you. Thank you very much. Stay safe.